Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Carlene Kudak. I'm the operations coordinator at CASA. And as I said to many of you, we are very excited to be hosting another Ask CASA event. And I'll pass it over to Jamie to intro our speakers.
Hey guys, nice to see you all. So yes, I'm Jamie. I know I've met most of you, talked to most of you, but if not, I'm the volunteer coordinator at the CASA project here. So just wanted to say hi. And we also have Jim here with us and Julie. I'll just let them say hello and then we'll jump in and have Molly and Diane tell us a little more about themselves so that we get all that great information. So go ahead, Jim, if you want to say hello, that would be great.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to see that everybody that is here thought they would take advantage of this valuable session. So welcome.
I would just echo that. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Diane and Molly, for being here and for sharing your expertise with us. And thank you, Jamie and Carlene, for organizing. And I also wanted to recognize Deb McDonald as one of our board members, and she's on this call as well. So great to see you, Deb. And thank you, everyone, for all of the commitment that you have to CASA and for our kids.
Yes, thank you. All right. So Diane or Molly, I think it's going to begin. We'll go ahead and let you talk about the FaCES clinic, what your role is, what Diane's part is. We do have another recording on our website from when Diane joined us. When was that, Diane?
It was a few months ago, but it was
just a few months ago, which was wonderful. So again, you can access any of our Ask CASA recordings on our website, which is linked to our YouTube channel. So, but go ahead, Molly, begin.
All right, thanks, Jamie. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. I'm just gonna get my screen. Jamie, I should be, oh, yep, I can. So bear with me just for a second as I get this up.
While you're pulling that up, Molly, I'll introduce myself and say that I'm a trauma coach here at UMass at the FaCES clinic. And first of all, I thank you all for having your cameras on. I love seeing your faces. So most of you are able to do that. If you're eating your lunch and you don't want to share, I get it. But I do love seeing your faces. And Molly's going to explain the roles that we take here, everything that we do here. I just wanted to say that I was a foster parent. And so before I was a trauma coach, I come to this role with my lived experience, and I very much appreciated the CASA workers that came to the house and visited with me and talked to me and asked and really advocated for the children that I was caring for. So I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you for that, and I'll let Molly take it away.
Sure. So Diane, I'm just going to add a little bit more about you. So Diane was actually a foster parent for 10 years. And she is a biological parent, an adoptive parent, and a parent to so many other children, young adults as well, I should say. So we're so lucky to have Diane here at the FaCES clinic. And my name is Molly Hanson. I am the trauma educator. As we go through the presentation, I'll kind of explain a little more what our roles here at the FaCES clinic mean. But I am a foster parent as well. I've been a foster parent with the department for about 6 years. Currently, I have our house on hold, although we still get calls for some short-term and emergency placements, which I have trouble saying no to, but really trying to focus on our 3 adopted children who we've adopted from care all within the last year. They've been with us longer, but finalized in the last year. So that's been really exciting. So I'll jump right in. And first, I'm just gonna start with what is our FaCES clinic here at UMass. All right. So if you've ever wondered, what does FaCES stand for? It stands for the Foster Children Evaluation Services. It was established by our fearless leader, Dr. Heather Forkey, who is, if you don't know who she is, she's a nationally recognized advocate for children in foster care. She's a pediatrician, and she does so much to advocate for kids in the foster care system, and we're lucky to have her on the ground here in Worcester County. We serve primarily the Central Region DCF offices, just we're located here right in Worcester. And when it did start, it was really about medical services, but it has since grown to include comprehensive care, including both mental health and educational services for children in the foster care system. And I just wanted to share the mission with you. So I will read it so you can get an idea of exactly what we're striving for here. So the mission is to provide comprehensive and coordinated healthcare for children in foster care settings. Focused on the whole child, we are here to support the youth in foster care, their caregivers, and the community to achieve wellness for every child in foster placement. So, kind of think of that idea of the whole child, and not just supporting the child themselves, but the caregivers, their community, as we go through some of the specific services. And then after I go through some of the specific services, we have a little more, I guess, meaty information about, what we really do with our work. So, but I'll just jump into kind of the overview of our services right here. And Diane, anywhere you want to jump in?
I was just going to ask this group, I know not everybody has their camera on, but I'm really curious. I know some of you probably join a lot of sessions, and some of you, maybe even this might be your first Ask CASA session, and it might be the very first time you've heard of FaCES too. So I'm just curious if people have the ability to put in the chat their experience with FaCES, and we can kind of address it later. And if you don't know, they've never heard of it before, I mean, I don't think you'll be alone in saying that. So if you're brave enough to share that in the chat, I would really love that, because I think that'll help us guide the question part at the end.
Great, thank you. So the first couple slides is really just kind of going through some content. If you do have any burning questions, feel free, Diane, if you don't mind monitoring the chat. But as towards the middle to end of the presentation, we're going to be doing a little more discussion and interaction. So I will go on. Oh, I forgot I had this slide in here. I like to refer to this slide as the faces of FaCES. So you'll hear a little more about what the role is, but on the top row there are our psychiatrists and clinicians that we have. The middle row, the first three pictures are our medical providers. And then the last picture is Gabriella, who's our project coordinator. And then the last row is intentionally, well, not intentionally the last or bottom row, but intentionally we are all put together. It's myself and Diane, Zena, who is another one of our trauma coaches, and Fitzroy, who is our educational navigator. And what I think is so special about this row, and what brings an added layer to our clinic, is all four of us either are or have been foster parents for DCF. So I'm
going to interrupt you again, Molly, because we have a special surprise guest, Zena.
Oh.
So she's in the bottom row, and Zena, like Molly was explaining, is a trauma coach. She has the same role that I have, except she also is bilingual, so she does it even better than I do. So Zena, you want to just say hi?
Hi, everybody. So yes,
Hi.
I'm the trauma coach, and I speak Spanish, and I'm also bringing the experience of being a kinship parent as well.
So this is Fran Anthes. I'm one of the CASA volunteers, and Zena has been incredible in her work with the family I'm working with. Really, really helpful.
Yes, I just saw that in the chat, Fran. I didn't realize we were about to meet you. Oh.
It's nice to put a face to a name, Francis.
All right, so back
and
to
every morning we all coordinate our outfits,
Yeah. What color is tomorrow? What do you wear on Friday?
Hopefully something a little brighter, right? We're all kind
Yeah.
of brownish today. I don't
Yeah, it matched. It's a windy day. It kind of feels like fall. Oh, thank you guys.
Alright.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk briefly about the medical piece here at the FaCES clinic. We have doctors and a nurse practitioner. In case people on the call don't know, whenever a child comes into care, they must see a medical provider at 7 days into placement and 30 days into placement. It can be done by their pediatrician, but there are, sometimes barriers with scheduling, or the pediatrician doesn't really understand. There are medical social workers in DCF offices now that try to work a little more with pediatricians which is great, but it's not always possible. And especially for some of the more complex cases, it's really nice for them to be able to come here to the FaCES clinic and get medical, because it also opens the door for mental health and educational services. So we are not strictly 7:30 day. We can do additional rescreens, follow-ups should any further issues or just the need arise. We try to be very accommodating. Our medical providers are trained in trauma and perform trauma sensitive exams. We also have a dog, a therapy dog that can accompany on the visits, which has been really nice for the kids. And how we are kind of talking about this whole kind of coordinated medical care. So we don't say, hey, just bring the kid in and we'll look them over. We want to see their previous records. Not always possible to get them based on circumstances, but most of the time. So, we kind of know what we're looking at and have a background when the kids come in. And also some kids come in and they haven't had a primary care provider, or they don't have one in the area. So, we assist with that, because it's not, you had your 30-day, bye, good luck. No, we're here to help coordinate services for ongoing services as well. And of course, our providers can refer for any sort of specialty medical services. Our medical providers, as I mentioned, can refer to our clinic's mental health and educational navigator services, which I'll get into in a minute. And I did just say down there that we do use a trauma screening tool as well. I'm not going to talk a whole bunch about it, but I have a couple slides about it as we go on. So I am going to now move on to the education portion of our clinic. We call it THREADS, which stands for Transforming Healthcare to Resource Education Services. And we are comprised of a team. And I really kind of want to highlight the word team, because here within the FaCES clinic, we are a team. We work together. It's not, medical provider up here, social worker, trauma it's not. We all work together, to benefit the child. And we're all here housed in the same section of UMass. So it's really nice that we spend a lot of time collaborating to make sure we're trying to provide the best services and advocacy for the children who come to our clinic. So the THREADS team, we also have some community volunteers, which is awesome. And we really look at what are the educational needs and how can we advocate for the educational needs of the kids here in Worcester County and throughout Massachusetts. And on this team is an education navigator. So that was Fitz, who was the fourth picture down there in my FaCES of FaCES slides. And he's a support to DCF and really foster parents. He helps navigate things such as IEPs, disciplinary issues, school placements. I'm sure probably a lot of you know that the educational system is not easy to navigate in the first place, let alone for kids who have experienced trauma, kids who are in the foster care system, kids who are bouncing. So he's kind of a stable figure who can help with that. So he's a great benefit to our team. And then the third and final part of our team is our, we call it our safe and sound group, I guess. It's where we really focus on mental health. Again, I really want to highlight that it's a team approach. And in this, I'm gonna kind of outline the role of some of our staff, but not the doctors themselves, because I already did that in medical, but the doctors and nurse practitioners are just as much a part of this safe and sound team focusing on the kids' mental health. So first is me, the trauma educator. So I am the trauma educator for the FaCES clinic. I also cover our child protection clinic here, which are the kids come in either outpatient or we see them inpatient when there's concerns of abuse. And I help caregivers, families access mental health support for their children and themselves. And I also assist with referrals for evidence-based trauma treatment. And I will talk a little bit more about that as we go on.
Molly, can I say something?
Sure.
I also, Molly's being very humble about her position as a trauma educator, because there is a good reason why she's making this presentation today. She knows all the pieces of the puzzle. And so these kids, when they come into care, they might need supports. The family members might need supports. She knows the system because she's a parent, so a foster adoptive parent. She knows the system inside and out. And she really can connect all the dots, whether it's with Fitzroy or it's one of the mental health providers or it's services out in the community. She's like that North Station in Boston, you know, she's connecting all the stops. So without Molly, we wouldn't have all the glue, I think, that we need to inform each other. So go ahead, Molly.
Thank you, Diane. I like North Station. I like that. I'm gonna use that. All right. And then, of course, we have our trauma coaches, who are Diane and Zena, who are lived experience professionals who really provide that peer support. They go into homes with foster parents. They do the meat and potatoes work, I think. They're really the ones that stand alongside them and help them advocate and educate them. And one thing that I think is really important is they really work on placement stability, because as we'll talk about later, every time a child moves, it's another trauma for them. So we really want to try to minimize that. And I think a couple months ago, you had some of the wonderful folks from MSPCC come and talk about their program, their Encompass program with their trauma coaches. And Diane has really kind of spearheaded that and training them, since the trauma coach idea was born out of our FaCES clinic here at UMass. So we're really excited that Diane and Zena are leading the charge to expand this program, since it's so valuable to foster parents.
Yes, thank you. Just a reminder, everyone, that recording with Sarah joined us from Encompass, and many of you have already watched it or were able to attend, but you're welcome to log on to our main website, and it's posted on our homepage if you do want to watch it, and it will count towards your continuing education hours. So I keep track of those and make sure you get credit for them, and it's really interesting and relevant material. So thank you. Go ahead, Molly.
Thanks, Jamie. The other thing we do here is we do have two, and I do really want to highlight the part-time piece for clinicians and psychiatrists. In an ideal world, we'd have multiple full-time clinicians and psychiatrists, but that's just not the reality right now. But our psychiatrists are happy to see anyone that have first come through our medical providers for which is either Dr. Forkey or Svensson or Lorna Kogan. They can refer directly for the psychiatrist for a med-eval and like short-term medication management before they can be linked to someone in the community or somewhere else. And we have two very, very, very part-time clinicians who do some interim bridging counseling. Again, I wish we had so much more, and that's kind of our dream. I just don't want people to get the idea like FaCES offers therapy. We wish we could offer therapy to every single kid. But you know, hopefully in a couple of years we come back and talk about our even more robust mental health
Molly, there are some
services.
questions in the chat about
Oh, yeah.
how the referral process goes. Like, how does a kid end up at FaCES in the first place?
Oh, that's a great question. So the referrals come from each DC. They have to come through DCF. If you ever have a DCF, because sometimes the DCF workers don't know themselves just because they're new or they have a lot on their plate and they're like, I want my kid seen at FaCES. The ongoing worker or supervisor needs to talk to the medical social worker in the office, and we get all our referrals directly from the medical social worker in each DCF office. So we have a very close relationship with the workers in North Central, the Worcester offices in South Central. So that's to come in through medical. We wish we could provide mental health services to every child out there, but unfortunately we only have so much manpower. So the referrals either for myself, for education navigator, and for trauma coaching with one caveat, which I'll get to, come directly from the medical providers here. We, as I mentioned, we really talk about kids as a team. That's how it kind of comes out of that. But our trauma coaches do actually have a contract with North Central DCF, and they can make referrals directly to our trauma coach program as well. And with that said, I do want to say, after this, I'm going to send Jamie some resources that I'd like, Jamie, if you don't mind, to send out so people aren't like writing down like things.
Yeah, and I'm taking some notes too. but yeah, anything you can send is helpful. That way, if anyone reaches out to us, we know exactly what steps they should take. So yeah,
Great.
thank you. I'd be happy to send it.
And I give full permission to send my email. Please, please, please don't send me anything case specific, but I am more than happy to provide additional resource for education, a trauma education. If you just have any questions about navigating the system, any kind of general questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Okay. And finally, here on our mental health piece is we offer a training called the Resource Parent Curriculum, which is a trauma training for foster parents. And Diane there's a rewrite happening right now, and Diane happens to be co-chair for this national committee through the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. So Diane is a huge part of this, which is
I am in
awesome.
love with the Resource Parent Curriculum. The Resource Parent Curriculum is the only national curriculum designed that is a promising evidence-based treatment for foster parents. So in other words, it's created for caregivers. So it's designed with the intention that it's supporting the person who is supporting the traumatized child. So in other words, it could be a grandmother that has their grandchildren that are in care. It could be, an unrestricted foster home, could be an adoptive or pre-adoptive parent as well. But you're parenting somebody that you didn't give birth to, and probably that kiddo has some trauma. So even if it's just the trauma of removal, which Molly will get to later. But the Resource Parent Curriculum is in English and Spanish because Zena, who just had to step out, teaches, and she did the translation for it. So we are currently about the only place in the country where you can give Spanish speaking support to foster parents in a trauma curriculum. So we're really proud of that. And we have a class that just started. If you have a family that would be interested, the Spanish one next Wednesday they would need to be available for the class that starts next Wednesday. And we're starting one the Wednesday after that in English. And so we'll also put those flyers out there too.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say that, Diane. I'll make sure people know how to access the flyers for those, because we offer them, continuously.
Molly, we do have a relevant question in the chat. We have a lot of great questions in the chat, but I don't want to throw them all at you now. But this one, can CASA volunteers attend the Resource Parent Curriculum courses, or is it foster parents only? Or go ahead, I'll let you answer.
Diane. That's a great question. I have what I call an auditor spot. And so I typically use that for our med students and whatnot that are interested in learning more about trauma. I can't have like a ton of people auditing because I have to make this a safe place for foster parents to share with other foster parents. So the answer is maybe.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. Gotcha. Thank you.
All right. And the one thing I do want to highlight about foster parents is they don't have to have a child who came through the FaCES clinic. This is open to any foster, adoptive, kin, what we consider resource parent, as Diane said, a parent who is parenting a child they did not give birth to. So I also really want to distinguish that, that it's broad. It's not just like a departmental foster parent, but it can be, anyone can sign up. So please feel free to promote it as much as possible with the families you're working with.
Can it also be, and it sounds like it can be within any time frame, say I had a kinship foster child 8 years old, and then around 11 or 12 things started coming up that I felt like this would be a good support. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely,
I thought so.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. I thank you for letting us clarify that. Yes.
And the question in the chat about Art Grow. Art Grow is wonderful, and in the rewrite we're including some of the materials from Art Grow in the our RPC 2.0. So the new version will have a little bit more. I think what Art Grow really offers that the RPC does not is what we call caregiver regulation, and so that's I think they're very complementary. Put it that way.
All right. Okay. So I am going to move on, but great questions. Thank you so much. Keep them coming.
Yes, we'll take time for questions after, because again, there's some great ones. So we do see them. We'll come back to those. All right, go ahead.
So now I want to talk about, why do we talk about trauma? Like, are you guys thinking like these people at FaCES, they love trauma? Molly has already said trauma so much. Trauma is in her title. Trauma is in Diane's title. Why do these people love trauma so much? Well, I don't think it's that we love trauma, but we love trying to understand trauma and educate others about trauma so we can best support these children in care. And most of the children in care, we know they come in to care by some nature of trauma. It could be a single traumatic event. It could be ongoing trauma. It could be ongoing neglect, on witnessing domestic violence. But usually kids have experienced a lot, and that's why they come into care. And then home removal itself, regardless of the environment they're being removed from, it's a traumatic event. And then unfortunately, the foster care system itself can perpetuate further trauma, which is what we really want to try to help mitigate. And that's why we're here. So I want to go back for a second to this idea of complex trauma. In the next slide, I'm going to give you guys about a minute, and I want you each to read this slide carefully, and then I'm going to ask you a question. So here it is. Oops, I'm sorry. And it left. There we go. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I have kind of a silly technical question because I am not a technical person. I'm not sure if I'm doing this in the exact right PowerPoint mode, but can you guys read it all, or are there windows there in the way for some of it?
No, I can read it. If anybody can't, just unmute yourself, let us know. But yep, I can read. The first word is per and last word stability.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing blocking it. So.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. All right, sorry to interrupt. I'll give you guys another few seconds.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, so as you notice in this, I bolded and underlined, so it was extra clear, a couple different parts. And this is where I kind of want to hear from you all. What do you notice about the words in the sentences that are highlighted here? Why do you think I did that? And please feel free to put it in the chat or unmute or whatever you prefer.
I think if you're comfortable unmuting, we could have a few people share their thoughts. I know we have a lot of questions in the chat. I want to be able to get back to those and answer them, but either way works.
Hey, this is Peg Kinsman. I see the word like personal, interpersonal. It's a lot about the relationship or the lack of a relationship with caregivers.
Thank you, Peg.
It sounds to me like what you're getting at here is that these traumatic events not only have immediate consequences, but they can have consequences that last throughout the lifetime of the individual. And I gather that the implication is that if they receive trauma counseling or services, psychiatric services, whatever is going to do the trick, that these lifelong effects may be mitigated.
Thank you, Bill.
I have not necessarily a different take, but if there's anything I've learned is that all of our children on our caseload are traumatized. And I think the overwhelming desire of our advocates almost across the board is to try to get all these children some kind of help to deal with that trauma. And some of it is ongoing. In some of our cases, it's an ongoing situation. And in other cases, they've been run over by a train at a young age and nobody's picked them up off the tracks. And those effects, it just ripples through their whole life. So we have some cases with older children that can't really operate in our world anymore because of what's happened to them in the past. So, I know you said, well, I got trauma in this, and we talk about trauma and that, and trauma. Well, trauma is what our world is comprised of when we are in this world of dealing with children within the system. I know that part doesn't answer your question, but just
No,
thank
you.
It's all about the.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I'm gonna not say too much about this. Thank you. That was all great contributions. But I'm gonna ask you to kind of keep this in mind, this definition, especially these parts as we go through the presentation a little more. I'm gonna continue on. I do want to take a few minutes to talk about factors that exacerbate trauma in foster care. So we'll go through each one briefly, and just so everyone is aware, this is kind of a list that comes from the American Academy of Pediatrics. So first is the rejecting behaviors by birth parent toward the child or teen, whether those are actual rejecting behaviors or perceived rejecting behaviors by the child, because I like to go off the premise that parents are doing the best that they can with the tools that they have at that time. And when a removal happens, it's not that they're rejecting the child. They just, they can't do it at that point in time. But often children do see that as rejecting. Being blamed by family members for the involvement of social services. I've seen this multiple times with siblings. They get really angry with one sibling, the sibling who may have disclosed abuse or neglect that was going on. And just to, put it out there, not every kid, but the vast majority of kids who are put in care want to go home. They want to be with their families. And I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about oh, sorry, did someone have a question? Oh, no, okay, sorry. We're going to talk a little bit at the end about language to use trauma-informed language. So this one really kind of stood out to me. I'm taking these kind of word for word for the AAP, and it's lack of flexibility and warmth on part of the foster or kinship caregiver toward child. I personally like to reframe this and say it's a lack of education and support for the foster parents. Today, the average placement for a foster parent is 1 kid before they close their home. Obviously, that's not all foster parents, but unfortunately, that's becoming more and more common. And we really need to do a better job of training and providing ongoing support, specifically trauma-informed training to foster caregivers and resource parents. Multiple transitions that occur.
Molly, this is Fran Anthes. I think I would also add to that in terms of the support for the foster caregivers, to give them a really clear picture of what they're adding to the child right now, even if things change and the child goes back to their family of origin for the rest of their lives. I think that it's really important that the foster parents understand, like, they're the people with their finger in the dike in terms of protecting the child. And I think it's really important that we tell them that all the time, because what they worry about is that the child who they've come to care about a lot is going to go back to a bad situation. So supporting the good situation that they're providing at that moment, I think, is really important.
That's a great point. Thank you. Thank you for that. And Diane and I talk a lot about empowering foster parents. And I think that's kind of what you're speaking to as well. So thank you for that. There's multiple transitions. What really stood out to me in this kind of the examples with social workers, I feel like there's so much turnover at DCF right now, and some kids I can't even keep up with who their worker is. So they just have so many changes. And of course, if they're bouncing placements, schools, therapist, anyone. And I think, again, that's why it's so great. And I'd like to say thank you to all you wonderful CASA volunteers, because sometimes you are the only people who really stay with some of these children. So
this is Fran again, and I don't want to hog the microphone, but I have a pitch to make on this one. So as soon as the adoption is final, literally we get a letter about a day later. We're told to destroy all the records, and the assumption is that the relationship that the CASA person had with the kid is done. And I think that's really unfair to the kid. I mean, it's probably unfair to the kid.
I did not know that, Fran.
I didn't know that either.
That is
so some of us voluntarily like try and keep some connection there, but literally we get a discharge paper at that moment. And it can mean that you don't even say goodbye to the kids, depending on how you've got a relationship with the family. But I think, there needs to be a caveat someplace that makes sure that transition is supported in some way.
That is not trauma informed. And Fran, that's something that I'm going to repeat to others, because I had no idea that happened. And I fostered mostly teens, and they almost all had CASA workers. I had some pretty tough kiddos, and who it was far from their first rodeo. But if they made a connection with anybody, I wanted them to maintain a connection, right? So, and honestly, if they transition on to adulthood, those kids really need somebody in their life. You could be the person that a job reference that they can use, somebody that can vouch for their personal character. I thank you for sharing that.
Diane, I need to add though, I've always told my advocates that your relationship, if they're adopted or even go back with the birth parent, it's your relationship with the child and the foster parents. It's got to be mutual. So if the adoptive parents don't have a problem with it, or if the parents don't have a problem with it, and most importantly, if the child's okay with it, then I encourage my advocates to maintain these relationships. And I have cases where even foster parents are still reaching out to advocates after 8 or 9 years, in my experience. So while technically we are discharged because it's a legal thing, our relationships depend literally on our relationships with the people.
Oh,
Yes,
thank
and-
you, Jim. You
and I
brought
would
me
just
way
add-
down.
Thank you, Jim. And Fran, thanks for bringing that up. It's something that we can talk about with our, as our program staff together in terms of how that's being communicated. Like Jim's point is a great one. Discharge papers versus maintaining a relationship not as a CASA worker, but as a person in that child's life. Being able to set that boundary and make that distinction once the discharge papers, have been completed, right? So Lynn and Jim and the rest of us internally can talk more about, I appreciate that being brought up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Jim has been great with encouraging me to do that. So I don't want, this isn't about that. It's about a systemic thing that I think needs to get mentioned.
Yeah. No, thank you, Fran. Thank you, everybody. All right.
Tina has something she wants to say.
I'm
Sorry.
sorry, but that just kind of like hit a bell in my mind, and I'm thinking, in most cases, adoption cases, there's a lot of services that will continue for a year or so, and why wouldn't the CASA worker services, which is so important, continue also for a year or so?
Yeah.
After the adoption. So
She's adopted, so she knows. And Molly too.
And I think it's
Great
important,
trauma-informed thinking. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
and it's just important that, it's hard to break, and we can, we send things with them. I send books, writing a note out, I'm always your friend, and, and keep that relationship going. But it's important that, I think part of the letter was that we continue to protect their privacy, and to the documents as a legal thing need to be destroyed. And that's, that's a reminder to go with it, that you're continuing to protect that minor's privacy.
Right.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I think that started a great conversation. So thank you so much. I'm gonna actually, time management is not one of my strong suits, and I'm already like, oh my gosh, we're so far through this. So I'm gonna apologize. I might go quickly through a couple things, but I really want to get to what I think is the really great part towards the end. So if there's something that I go too quickly over, please stop me. So oops, I went a little bit ahead of myself here. Just adding a few more. Abuse or neglect in foster or kinship placement. I do just want to say, in my professional and personal interactions with foster parents, there are so many amazing foster parents out there. But the reality is sometimes this does happen. But I think some people have the perception that, people outside the system, like all foster homes are bad. Like, there are so many wonderful foster families. I just want to highlight that. But the reality is sometimes abuse and neglect, because they can take place anywhere. Ongoing uncertainty of a placement, kids in care often feel and really do have a lack of permanency. So they kind of feel indispensable in that, they could just be kind of tossed out or moved somewhere tomorrow. Inappropriate parental behavior during visitation. I won't really get into that, but we know sometimes just parents are working on what they need to work on, and it's hard for them to really be consistent with visits while they're still kind of working through their own things. And professionals without training who may use language or interact with children in a way that aren't therapeutic or healing. And I think I'm so glad everyone's here today to, learn, and I'm hearing so many great comments. So I hope, all professionals and volunteers and, out there who are working, teachers who are working with these kids, are taking the time to learn, because I think people have the best of intentions, just don't always have the tools to, know exactly the best words or things to say, as I stumble on my words, of course. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Please don't feel like you need to read everything on the slide. My point in putting this is the impact of childhood trauma is vast, and it can have effects on kids in so many different ways. These different life domains that intersect. trauma is different for everyone, right? You're not going to have a kid who's gonna, hopefully not a kid that has every single one of these sort of symptoms, but every kid is different and every kid reacts differently to trauma. And that's kind of what I want you all to take away right now, is that kids can face the same exact traumatic events or experiences and have very different reactions. And
Molly, Molly, I'd like to add, last month, our Ask CASA series, we had a presenter, Gail Epstein, who she actually discussed brain development, in children, and also the effects and the impact of trauma on the brain. So it goes along a lot with what you have on the slide here. And again, that's on our website, but it'd be awesome for all of us to get together and it really applies, it all overlaps. So yeah, a lot of this is familiar if those of you saw it, but it's so important for the work we do. So thank you.
I think what's wonderful about our team here at FaCES is that everybody is fully aware of all these pieces. And so if we look at a child with some behavior, we could see that behavior as ADHD, or we could see it as hypervigilance, and we could see it as a coping skill that they needed to pay attention because they were in a domestic violence environment, for example. So your average neighborhood pediatrician is not necessarily trauma informed. They may or may not be, because trauma is not a necessary part of their curriculum. So if a kid comes into FaCES, our team will not necessarily say, oh, this is a trauma symptom, but we will be using a trauma lens.
Yeah, absolutely. And that leads me in to the next couple of slides, which I'm going to kind of fly through because I want to get a little further. We do use a trauma screening tool here. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of it just because I feel like we have more exciting things to wrap up and talk about. But I want to make it very clear, the trauma screening really looks at the symptoms and how can we really target that symptoms that the child is experiencing to enhance their overall well-being. So while trauma screening tools are great, and we love the data we get from it as well, it doesn't always give the whole picture as well, but it can definitely be a useful tool in our toolbox of our larger toolbox of when we work with children in care. So I'm actually just gonna fly through these. And then I do want to kind of, I make this pitch for evidence-based trauma treatment. It's so important. It is not kind of what I want to get on in the presentation, though, is it's not the only answer for healing children who have experienced trauma in children in care. So what I'm going to say is please be aware of evidence-based trauma and treatment, and that it's typically recommended for kids in care. As you can see, I put some of the core components down here across all treatments: safety, psychoeducation, coping skills, strengthening relationships. If I had a little more time, I'd talk about it a little more, but I want to move on. And again, I apologize that I'm not better at time management here. This is just a quick overview of, we really have this plug for evidence-based treatment, trauma treatment. And this is kind of just an overview of, if you're like, what is she talking about evidence-based? Evidence-based refers to research, but also like individual clinical experience and the values of the child, family, caregivers that you're working with. So that's what that is. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly as well. I think everyone on here probably knows we are in a current mental health crisis. The Surgeon General actually issued an advisory in December of last year, basically signifying that for youth, this is a significant public health issue. And unfortunately, the bottom line is the need for children's mental health services exceeds the resources that are currently available. So with this said, that was a little doom and gloomy, but so how can you as CASA advocates be an effective mental health advocate for the kids you're working with. Ensure that children are on wait lists for mental health agencies that have clinicians trained in evidence-based trauma. Like I said, that piece, it's not everything, but it's so important. So even though services may not be immediately available, get the kids on the wait list because those wait lists are only growing. Encourage caregivers to follow up with the agencies. Agencies do value when the caregivers themselves, and sometimes that's hard, right, if kids are in group care or bouncing. So I recognize there is limitations on that, but if there is an identified caregiver, encourage them to be calling and being like, hey, still need services, kind of being that squeaky wheel. If a placement is at risk of disrupting, talk to DCF about support and stabilization services. They do have contracted services that are short-term. But as we talked about earlier, placement disruption is another trauma in itself. So anything we can do to help minimize placement disruptions. Maintain consistent communication and collaborate with everyone on the team, you know, children in care. I say sometimes, you know, kids with bigger teams, sometimes less is being done for them because the communication or collaboration might not be there. So it's really important that everyone's on the same team and remembering that that child or teen is on that team as well.
Molly,
yes?
I want to say one thing on the reducing placement disruption.
Yeah.
And I know it's something we cover in training and something that I've stands out to me the most about having a CASA volunteer, and many of our volunteers may already know, but I just want to reiterate that it's shown that by a child in foster care having a CASA advocate, that they do experience fewer placements. So there have been studies done, and they do show that they actually are placed in fewer foster homes just by having a CASA advocate. So I think that's like one of my, I get so excited when I hear that, because like you said, that's a trauma each time. And I was in foster care myself, with I have shared with some of you, and I counted that I lived in 19 different homes by the age of 19 in one way or another. So so that's something that's definitely in my heart from my own experience, but it's so powerful that the work that our volunteers do can have that impact. So I like seeing it here in your slide as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Jamie. And then finally, we want to recognize that mental health support doesn't just mean therapy. There are plenty of other ways to support children's mental health. And I love this quote, so I'm just going to go ahead and read it to you. It says, the more healthy relationships a child has, the more likely he will be to recover from trauma and thrive. Relationships are the agents of change, and the most powerful therapy is human love. It's a little cheesy, I know, but I really love it because I feel that it is true. So now I want to kind of open it up to you all, and I'm just being mindful of time. Are we really strict in the next 4 minutes, Jamie?
Well, I have a question. You have this slide here. Are there any other slides? I just want to make sure we allow time for the chat, but also address this. And we do have some flexibility.
There's a brief, I have some ideas on this as well. So what I can do is kind of share what I had, and then people can feel free to add. And then I just had one slide about language, because I feel like that's so important.
Yeah,
so,
and I like everyone to know, if for any reason you do need to log off, certainly you're welcome to. Again, we are recording this. I am in no rush whatsoever and love hearing, I know we're all loving it. So please feel free to cover what you have. I just want to make sure people do get their answers in the chat. So if you do log off and you're like, hey, I had a question, I'll be looking back and make sure that we answer them. You can always email me and just say, I had to log off. What was the answer to that? I just want to make sure people get their answers. So, so go ahead, Molly.
Okay, so I'll kind of share what I had, and then, please feel free to add your own, or, really, say, yes, that's so important. But oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I am not very tech savvy today. There we are. So some ideas that come to my mind. Structure and routine. so important for kids in general, especially for kids who haven't had it. But the caveat I always put with that is for some capacity for flexibility, right? Because we can't be too rigid, because that's just kind of the world we live in. There needs to be some flexibility. So really that balance of good structure and routine, but the capacity for flexibility. Consistent, regulated caregivers. So let's go back to that quote about complex trauma. And the highlighted areas was really about interpersonal nature, relationships, caregivers. Caregivers have to be consistent and regulated. You can have all the therapy in the world and you don't have consistent and regulated caregivers, you're not going to have the same sort of healing journey. So that's really, I probably should have bolded it. That's, I think, one of the biggest part. And I do have a few others about caregivers, as you can see, caregivers who are affirming of identity. This one I really love as well, and could tell stories about it probably for like 2 more hours, but I won't. But caregivers who try to understand behavior rather than just provide consequences for behavior. Children's behavior tell us something. Every behavior has a feeling behind it. Often behaviors are kids trying to get their needs met and not having the proper tools or coping skills or even words to express those needs. So really, if there's anything you take away from this presentation, there's multiple things. I hope you do, but really I want to hammer this one home. And I hope that as CASA volunteers, you can really, hammer this home with caregivers as well. You know, kids aren't bad kids, right? There is something else there.
They're not doing it on purpose. They're doing the best that they can. And the behavior is a sign or a clue. And if we can have them be curious rather than furious about the behavior, that's one of the concepts we teach in the RPC. I know we only have a minute left time, and all the things that Molly put there are things that refill that bucket, because it's not just about the trauma, right? It's also about the positive things. So it's that balance on that teeter-totter, right? So I think it's also helpful to focus on what can be done. And I know a lot of CASA workers on this call are very concerned or anxious about, I need to get this kid the proper therapy. And we've just heard that there's a long wait list for therapy. So what can you do in the meantime? And so this was designed to give you hope. And I don't think it's a nothing thing. It's probably the thing. Even more important than therapy is that regulated caregiver, those positive experiences, all of that other stuff. They're not small things. This is where the magic happens in remapping the child's brain. And Molly, with that, I think we need to talk about language. I know you only have 30 seconds, but
yes.
Yeah, don't worry, we're not that strict.
Jumping right into language.
It's a guideline. It's don't worry. Yeah, but thank you for trying to keep on track. So these are great resources, and I'm jotting them down, and I know you'll send me more. So anyone reach out if you feel you have a need. Otherwise, I won't bombard you with all of them. But if our volunteers need anything, just reach out for more information. All right, go ahead, Molly.
Okay, so this is the last slide. The 2 slides after this are resources and contact information, so I'll make sure to send that all out. But I really want to get to this slide. Diane and I were talking about this yesterday and how important language is. And sometimes we don't even realize the language we use might not, be trauma informed, or it might actually be hurtful to the child. So just some examples that I kind of came up with, all examples of things that I've heard said. So one is your mom or dad is sick, or your mom and dad is working on becoming a better mom and dad. The reason for the word I put not good language with the word sick is a lot of kids, especially the younger kids, associate sick with like being in the hospital, death, dying, like, oh my gosh, why is my mom or dad sick? And that can cause added anxiety. And I lump these together, but this one is a little different too. I've heard people say your mom or dad is working on becoming a better parent. And the kids are probably like, what the heck? Most of these kids still think their mom and dad are the greatest mom and dad in the world because it's their mom and dad, right? So when you say that to a kid, it doesn't really honor the birth family. And we always want to try to honor their birth family, because no matter what happened, that's where the kids come from, and their family is part of their identity. So if we're not honoring the parents, we're not honoring the child. So some examples to use instead is your mom and dad is learning how to keep you safe, or your mom and dad is working on your service plan, on their service plan. So, you know, older kids know that DCF has service plans that they give to parents, and even the teens have their own parts in that. Diane shared with me yesterday that she heard an 8-year-old refer to the service plan as homework, and I love that. So the kids said, oh, my mom and dad need to work on their homework. So I thought that was a really kind of neat way to put it. Another thing I've heard is, you're lucky to have your foster parents. Essentially what that's saying to a kid is, you're lucky to be in foster care. You're lucky to have experienced trauma. You're lucky to be away from your family of origin. And that's not how kids feel. So an alternative might be, wow, it seems like your foster parents really care about you. Another one is, if you don't behave, you'll have to move foster homes. And that's where we come back to the placement disruption and added trauma. And that one really gets me. So trying something more like, how can we help you feel more comfortable in the home? So not like, these are the things that are going to make it not work, rather, how are we going to make it work? This one gets me. This was said, not directly in front of me, but a colleague had a teen, and she was told this by a professional. She was in a group home setting at the time, and she really wanted to go to the foster home, and she was told, being in a home is a privilege. And that's just not accurate. That's just wrong. And an awful thing to say. So something to say instead is, we want to set you up for success. And then the last one, I've heard kind of variations of this before, like, oh, you don't seem like a foster kid. You don't look like a foster kid. I would have never guessed you were a foster kid. And what I say to that is, just don't say that sort of. Just don't keep your mouth shut.
Well,
So
Molly, I think that's a good point, because as you mentioned the trauma, and I'm a registered nurse and a SANE nurse. I know Diane knows a sexual assault nurse examiner, so trauma, and then working here at CASA is a big part of the work I do. And sometimes you certainly say something and you go, oh my, I can't believe I said that. That wasn't how it meant to come out. So some of these, I would hope some of these people were like, man, I wish I hadn't said that after, right? And then what do you say? Like, sometimes I'll practice like saying, like, sometimes like, this is not an easy situation. This is a really hard situation. Like, like, what do you guys say when you don't really know what to say? What would you suggest?
I'd say, just be honest with kids. If you say something wrong, and just be like, geez, I should not have said that. I don't know why I'm sorry. Yeah. I think that's so important. Adults children don't need to think adults are perfect, because we aren't, right? When we need to model, exactly, we're all human. We all make mistakes, and that's okay. So it is really showing kids, how do we recover from that? And we all put our foot in our mouth sometimes, right? I do it all the time. But taking the responsibility and really kind of showing, like, I'm going to learn from that. I think that's so
those mistakes are opportunities for repair, and children are incredibly forgiving, and you modeling a mistake and building that repair it may be the first time in their life that they've had an adult that was teaching them how to do that. So don't be terrified if you do say something wrong. We all do.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, and then I'm gonna send out all that information and I'll send out the contact information. Again, I do apologize for going over, but if people are able to, and Jamie, if it's able to stay on, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for taking the time with us. And I will send out these resources to those of you that attended. Again, if you need any other resources or feel like there's something that the child you're working with or somebody you know even outside of your work with CASA, just reach out, because we do hear about all these resources. And we have questions in the chat. Anyone needs to log off, feel free. But let's see if I can scroll through. So we were talking about whether or not people had experience with the FaCES clinic. And so we have quite a few that have none experience, first time for me, no experience. We have a few people that have heard of the FaCES clinic, but now have learned much more about it. And then we have some CASA staff. Certainly it's something we're very familiar with. I'm becoming more familiar with. And I was a kinship foster parent at one point, and I remember going there to the clinic, and the little girl that lived with us had gone there, and it was a very positive experience for her and for me. So let's see here. And then we heard from Fran how much Zenny is helping the family that Fran works with, which is wonderful. All new to me. Let's see, we had somebody just called recently to receive an update for the child. So one of our advocates has reached out to FaCES. Another has heard Dr. Forkey speak and has a question about a current CASA case. Linda, if you are able to stay on, we can come to that question at the end and make sure that gets answered, or you can email it, whichever is easier for you. We'll keep going, scrolling through, but let me just jot down Linda. Let's see, yep, so other presentation by Dr. Forkey for childhood trauma. And then we have Peter Metz, Dr. Metz mentions FaCES at the CASA board meetings. So, so a lot of us very familiar with it. And then Julie, former UMass staff here, very familiar, very grateful. Yeah, I think it's agreed. We all really love learning about it, the services you provide, because they apply. They're what our children in foster care, like some of their first interactions, or they are their first interactions with the FaCES clinic after coming into care. Okay, let's see here. Just seeing if there's anything different. So someone had asked, does FaCES provide ongoing psychiatric prescribing services? No, so we've learned it's not intended for ongoing. You have your part-time clinicians that work there and help provide supports while people are waiting for long-term or ongoing services. And we do have some other resources for that. If any of you know people who are having a hard time, we have, I forget the website, but again, reach out if you're having an individual struggle. The waiting lists are long, but there are options that we can share with you. So, and then there's a question of, do we have any idea how long they are? I think that really varies for the wait list for children in DCF to receive therapy. I think it depends so much on where they live. Are they doing virtual? Are they doing in person? How often they're going? What type of therapy? But I don't even have a general idea. Do you guys, like 3 months, 6 months?
If I had to put a number on it, I would say around 6. I've seen kids wait longer, but I've also seen kids have a shorter time, if agencies get new clinicians in, so they grow their capacity. The other thing is in-home has a little bit actually of a shorter wait than outpatient therapy, but in-home is more of an intensive service, and there has to be a little more intense need. I'm not an expert about the criteria, but the in-home is a CBHI service. But if kids do, honestly, a lot of kids in care do have those, extra needs, and the caregivers need a little extra support. So in-home is a great option. In-home is short-term. So even if a child is receiving in-home, they should have a referral for outpatient as well, and then they can continue more with that.
Thank you. So we've answered some of these questions about the ARC Grow. We talked about that.
There's a question in there about bio parents and supports for them, and
Yes.
it's a trend in DCF to try to keep kids safely in care. So we actually have some bio parents that are coming through our clinic, believe it or not, because they are able to, keep their kids at home with a safety plan. So occasionally we're able to reach out in that way. I am also working with some folks from Vermont on a bio parent version of the resource parent curriculum. And if and when that becomes available, I'll be sure to send that info along.
Okay, thank you. Linda, was this your question here, and do you want to ask it now? If a child entered foster care through North Central office, but a year later was placed with its brother in a specialized foster home in Chicopee, so Greenfield DCF, is the child still eligible to receive services at FaCES? So you don't serve Western Mass, do you? Is that correct, Molly and Diane?
It's specifically for trauma coach services, are you asking? Or
yeah, for the FaCES clinic, like would you? Yep,
Can I just want to elaborate. So the child's teacher, pediatrician, have both referred the child for a neuropsychological evaluation. He was suspended from kindergarten because of spitting, and so he has not seen a therapist for mental health, and he has not been evaluated. So we're just trying to figure out how he can be serviced in the most timely manner before school lets out, because they really feel like he needs an IEP or a 504 going forward.
Yeah, wow, thank you, Linda.
So what I'm going to say, and Diane, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we are strictly for Central Region. I think though what the caregiver or DCF would have to be, they have to be physically seen in our clinic by a medical provider to get any other service. So as long as they were willing to bring them here to Worcester, and I can confirm that, but I'm pretty sure that would be fine.
Yeah, it would definitely be fine if they're willing to travel. If they can get here, the kids in care, that can definitely happen. It would still require the medical social worker from that current office to send the referral. I will caution you that we are not the fast track to getting a neuropsych eval. That wait list remains the same whether we make the referral or someone else does. So if the referral's been made, that's great. Get them on that wait list for the neuropsych regardless.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for filling in the blanks on how to do that.
Thank you. And Linda, you can always email me and then I can help connect if we need, further help with that. So thank you. And then
Jamie, can I just mention one thing from that? So here, I did mention how we have the kind of bridging counseling, but it's so limited. But I think sometimes people think here at FaCES we have like an expedited path to get kids into like community mental health providers quicker. We don't. Really what we do is we try to support kind of the things we were talking about, the caregiver's capacity to support the child's mental health. Right. Yes, and we can certainly help with referrals, give guidance on that. But I just want to be very clear that if I call up an agency and say, hey, it's Molly from FaCES, that kid's still going the same place on the waiting list to community mental health agencies. So just some people think I like have this special power, and I'm like, oh wow, I really wish I did. but I don't. But there are
Right.
other things we can offer in terms of
Okay.
support in the meantime.
And I do have another website from a previous training of Ask CASA that we did, Linda, that is based on help finding services in the most timely manner. I don't know it off the top of my head. I know Lynn is familiar with it. And we both loved it. So that it might be something I can pull up after the meeting. But thank you. Yeah, it's good to be clear, because then too, we don't want to build up, you know, the people coming for kind of thinking they're going to get a speedier process slows things up more sometimes. So, so residential placements, children in foster care and residential placements, you serve them from your clinic, certainly.
Refugees
often,
as well, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's see. And Lynn had clarified what we talked about earlier about continuing, you know, we're not aiming to sever the relationship, and keeping in mind that our CASA supervisors really guide and support, like when that discharge letter from CASA is no longer appointed by the judge. So there's the legal side of it. And then the supervisor is still guiding them, and they're having their final meetings, so that, you know, change in relationship can certainly be discussed as it is. And then, thank you, Diane, you addressed the comment about the phone number and the phone not being answered at the clinic there. And we have thank you, lots of thank yous, thank you. Yes, and thank you for your work and presentation. Any resources for trauma coaches for the mother who doesn't have her children now but are working towards reunification? That's a great question.
Yeah, so if they've come through the FaCES clinic, if that child and mom, yes, we're trying to support whoever is caring for the child as much as possible.
Okay, thank you. And then as we say goodbye, and everyone's welcome to unmute and just say thank you. It is nice to hear and feel the energy because I know people really are appreciative. So feel free, everyone, to unmute and say thank you. And yeah, thank you so much, both of you. Diane, I know we've talked and worked before, and I've met Fitz when he first started there, and I really am glad to meet you now as well, Molly. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
So much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Appreciate it.
Wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you.